Welcome back to my channel, fellow Claude stans. I was just thinking, I've made a few videos about Brave Claude, but I've never actually shown you guys what my +8 OG Claude can do. So today, I'm gonna show y'all another reason to fear the Deer. As soon as the new changes to AR scoring were announced, I decided to switch out my rusty old defense team and make Claude the star of the new team. I'm gonna show you guys how I built my new team for Dark Season, and also show my defense replays from this week. So this is how I have my map laid out on the new defense team. Basically, I have my 4 cavalry units in a line, and then I have Eldigan and Sothis up there at the top, and basically the point of this layout is just to make it really hard for the opposing team in turn 1, especially if they have a lot of offense structures. It's going to make it harder for them to hide from my units and inevitably get hit by one of them. In terms of structures, I would say the 2 most important structures that you just cannot get rid of on this team are the Panic Manor and the Infantry School. The Panic Manor is max level, so it's 70 HP, and that's basically just to catch people off guard if they're trying to bait one of either Python or Reinhardt, and if they have any kind of buffs like tactics buffs, something that they can't get rid of, they're going to get hit by that panic tower, which is going to make it a lot easier for my units to kill. A lot of tanks I've noticed don't actually reach that 70 HP threshold, so it is really helpful to have the panic tower there. In terms of the Infantry School, a lot of people tend to run infantry tanks on Aether Raid's offense, so that's basically just going to make it so that unless they have something like Brunya's weapon, or an attack speed bond 4, or any kind of bond 4, they are going to get hit by that debuff that they just cannot get rid of. The other 2 structures that I'm running aside from the Panic Manor are my level 7 Dark Shrine and my level 5 Tactics Room. I do think the Tactics Room is pretty useful down there to limit the movement of people with under 60 HP, but honestly, the rest of the structures are not that important. So now let's talk about the units that I use and why I decided to use them. You guys know that I love Claude, so when the Forma version of him came out, I decided it would be a perfect opportunity to get some premium skills on him and then put him on my defense team, because before I wasn't running him on any defense teams. So I'm running Spendthrift Bow on him, which really helps with his survivability, and it helps with his damage output as well. And then I'm running Moonbow as his special. I do think that's better than Glimmer, because his attack is not so high that I think it would be better with Glimmer. And then I'm running Attack Speed Push 4 in his A slot. The reason why I'm running Push over something like Swift Sparrow is because the recoil damage is going to help with my Wings of Mercy strats later on. And then in his B slot, I'm running Lull Speed Defense, which is what he comes with. I do think it is the best skill for him, because a lot of people will run super fast tanks, so having that lull speed is really helpful. And finally, I've got Panic Smoke in his C slot, which is basically just to make it even harder for the opposing team to run any kind of buffs, because Panic Smoke, as long as he survives, which he does survive most of the time with Spendthrift Bow, he gets off his Panic Smoke, which is really helpful. And in his Seal slot, I'm running Swift Sparrow 3 just to help with his damage output and his speed. His main role on this team is to stay alive after that first round of combat where he initiates. Obviously, I do hope that sometimes he'll be able to initiate in 1 round a unit, but a lot of people are running super tanky units who just can't be 1-rounded by basically anyone. So the point is for him to stay alive, which is what Spendthrift Bow really helps with, and then get danced by Eldigan so that he can go snipe another unit, such as the Flyer Mythics, who he can easily one-shot. But I know not everybody obviously has a highly invested Claude, so some possible changes that you could make if you were trying to make a team like this is to use a different player phase Bocav, someone like Brave Lynn, or Bernadetta, or even one of the free ones like Louise or Rolf, and you could use them instead. You could also, in his weapon slot, use Budding Bow as like an impact skill, or Fire Sweep Bow if you want, but I decided to go with Spendthrift Bow for survivability because I thought it was really helpful. You could also run Swift Sparrow 2 or 3 in the A slot if you wanted. Swift Sparrow 2 would be more of a budget option, but it's definitely something that you could do. And another thing that you could do if you don't have Panic Smoke fodder is run Goad Cavalry in the C slot. Panic Smoke is better, but not everybody has access to that fodder. Next up is one of those units who has carried me through so many different game modes throughout the years and is immune to power creep in my opinion, my +10 Reinhardt. He's running his PRF weapon because it is really good, and as his special, I'm running Iceberg on him over Luna, because with ARD attack res active at the max level, which it often will be because it's hard to snipe my defense structures, he's getting an extra 10 resistance, so he's hitting 46 resistance, and that is a pretty massive Iceberg, so that's why I decided to go with that. There's no question about it that any kind of ARD attack skill is the best for him in his A slot, because it gives him an extra 10 attack, and there's no other A slot that can match that level of damage output. He's also got Lull Attack Res in his B slot, which is just amazing on him, in my opinion, his best B slot. and in my experience, a lot of people tend to underestimate just how strong a +10 Reinhardt with lull attack res is. In his C slot, I've got Goad Cavalry to help give extra attack and speed buffs, and then I'm running Death Blow in his seal slot, which is just even more damage output. So if you add up all of these attack boosting things, he basically ends up with, I believe, 66 attack on initiation, and then if you add the +3 from lull res, that is 69 attack that he's hitting on initiation. There are definitely some possible changes that you can make to this unit. So first of all, you don't have to use Reinhardt. You can use a different mage cav, someone like Selena who just came out and is super amazing, or Dancer Sigurd to get another dancer on the team as well. You can also merge someone else, maybe like Ursula, but in my opinion, Reinhardt is the unit who is super easily available and has an amazing weapon, which is why I decided to invest in him. You can also instead run Moonbow and the Quickened Pulse seal so that he gets Moonbow on the second hit. I'm not doing this because I have the Quickened Pulse seal on Sothis, so I can't run it on Reinhardt, but that is definitely an option as well if nobody else is taking your Quickened Pulse seal. You can also run Deathblow 3 or 4 in the A slot as a bit more of a budget option, and in his B slot you can also run a Breaker skill, something like Lance Breaker I've seen, which can be pretty decent on a budget if you don't have a lull skill, although I do think that the lull just takes him to that top tier a lot more than a Breaker skill does. Next up is Python, and for him I decided to go with a somewhat similar build to Claude, but not quite the same. So he's running Devilish Bow in his A slot to help stop the opposing team from charging their special when he's attacking them, and he's running Moonbow as his special. In his A slot, he's running Air Defense Speed Res, which helps patch up his subpar resistance and also helps with his speed, which is really helpful. And ARD Speed Res is available on Mercedes, who is available at 3 to 4 star, so it's a really good skill for a lot of people in AR defense. He's got Lull Speed Defense in his B slot for a similar reason as Claude, and then he's got Panic Smoke in his C slot just to help with those units who aren't hit by the Panic Tower. And finally, he's got Hardy Bearing as his seal to make it easier for him to deal more damage to Brave Ike. A couple of possible changes that you could make to this unit are to use a +10 Wrath or some other bow cav instead. I would recommend using a colored bow cav just because it's nice to have a little bit more color coverage on the team overall. As his weapon, you can also use Budding Bow or Fire Sweep Bow, but unfortunately I didn't have fodder for those, so I ended up going with Devilish Bow, which we did get with the Ephemera codes if you decided to take a copy of Halloween Niles. Another change that you could do, this is similar to the changes I recommended for Claude, are to give him Swift Sparrow 2 or 3 in the A slot, or Attack Speed Push 4 in the A slot, but I would recommend honestly sticking with ARD Speed Resistance, just because it is available at 3 to 4 star, and honestly, it is just so good on a cav line to use any kind of ARD skills. And finally, in his C slot, you can use Goad Cavalry as more of a budget option if you don't have Panic Smoke. Next up is my +1 Brave Veronica, and I decided to give her Flash Plus as her weapon because I had a Makoto who was kind of just gathering dust, and it can actually be really useful, so I'm not running a healing assist on her to make her prioritize attacking, so what she's going to do is in a lot of matches she'll go in and attack with Flash Plus, and then the people around the person who she attacked won't be able to counterattack anymore after that unless they have Nullsea Disrupt, which can be really helpful. Now, I'm also running Miracle as her special, first of all because it's the only special she could run that's a non-healing special, and second of all because maybe once in a while it'll activate and she'll be able to survive a hit that would have killed her otherwise. In her A slot, I decided to run AR Defense Speed Res, just to make her a bit harder to kill, so that brings her speed up to 47 and resistance up to 34, so it is harder to kill her because of that. And in her B slot, I'm running Wrathful Staff, which is just what she comes with, just so that she deals a bit more damage. And in her C slot, she's running Goad Cavalry for a bit of extra support to the cavalry units around her. As her seal, I decided to run Attack Defense solo because I'm running Speed Res in the A slot, so I thought it would be cool to patch the attack and defense up with her seal. And also, there are just not very many good seals for healers in general, so this one is decent. Her slot is honestly really flexible, so you can pretty much use any staff cav that you want. It helps if it's one with high speed and high attack, but you don't necessarily have to, so you can use someone like a +10 Nana, +10 Forest, +10 Priscilla, or even an Elise or anything like that. So there are a lot of options who you could replace Veronica with. You can also just use her Refined Staff instead of using something like Flash Plus, because honestly, I tested out with that too and it's still quite good. And finally, you can also run Attack Speed Push 4 in her A slot, or Attack Speed Solo, although in general, I'm not convinced that solo skills are that useful on cav lines because you sometimes end up with the calves right next to each other. Next up, we have honestly the real star of the show, who is dancer Eldigan, and he's running Wagasa Plus as his weapon for chill defense. He's running Dance and Bonfire as his special, although the special doesn't really matter because he's almost never going to be attacking. And in his A slot, I have Fortress Defense Res 3, because that is the skill that gives him the most visible defense in the game, so it's really, really helpful because his main role is going to be to avoid the isolation effect from Milla's turn wheel. And in his B slot, he's got Wings of Mercy, so that's going to enable him to teleport next to any of my calves who've managed to survive round 1, and then dance them, and then hopefully they'll be able to snipe someone. He's got Drive Attack in his C slot, just to give a little bit of extra damage to the people who he's going to be dancing. And finally in his Seal, he's got Fortress Defense 3, which is also super crucial because it builds his defense up even higher. Eldigan's two main roles on this team are, first of all, to be a Wings of Mercy dancer, but that's not what makes him special. That's not what makes him the star of the show, because anyone can run Wings of Mercy. Any dancer can just run that skill. But what makes him so good on this team is that he's able to shut down Milla's isolation effect 99% of the time because his defense is just so high. So that just makes him so valuable because he is the only free-to-play dancer with defense high enough to do this. You might be able to do it with like Dancer Xander, but he's obviously a limited 5-star exclusive seasonal, so Eldigan is just invaluable on any Aether Raids defense team. And obviously he has gorgeous art, so that is just another added bonus to using him on your team. Honestly, Eldigan is kind of perfect in this role, so I wouldn't really recommend making any substitutions, but I would say that if you have Triandra, you can use her instead. My only issue with using Triandra is that if the opposing team has a Milla, which is going to happen like 80% of the time in my experience, they just can instantly shut her down with the isolation effect. And then she won't be able to come in Wings of Mercy and dance your cavalry units, which in my experience, if Eldigan wasn't able to go and dance my cavalry units, this team would be doing a lot worse. So it is really, really good to use someone with this high defense. Now, if you do want to use Eldigan, which I highly recommend, I would say you can also give him Fortress Defense 3 in the A slot instead of Fortress Defense Res. You can also merge him to plus 10, and he's going to reach 60 defense then, which is just crazy high. I've only ever seen one Milla in my life that had defense higher than that. Last but not least is Sothis, who is unfortunately my only Dark Season mythic, so I kind of have to use her in this slot, but she can actually be pretty decent under the right conditions on my team. She's running her PRF weapon and her PRF special because they're really good on her, and the rest of her skills kind of tied together to make her a pretty decent Wings of Mercy nuke. So with Times Pulse and Quicken Pulse, she gets the -2 cooldown to Sirius, so she's able to instantly hit with it, and then along with Wings of Mercy and Attack Speed Bond 3, she gets that free 5 attack and speed when she Wings of Mercy's in, and then she's going to be able to hit with Sirius instantly. If you don't want to use Sothis, which honestly I don't blame you, you can just use Bramamond instead if you have them, because they have much better combat potential than Sothis does. However, if you're like me and you kind of have to use Sothis, what you can do, especially if your Sothis already has good IVs, is give her Attack Speed Bond 4 in the A slot, which is obviously significantly better than Attack Speed Bond 3. You can also decide to give her the Hardy Bearing Seal to help against Brave Ikes. I've heard of people who do that with their Sothis on their Cavline teams, but I already have Hardy Bearing on my Python, and plus I really like the idea of having Sirius ready in turn 1 for Sothis, so that is why I went with Quicken Pulse instead of Hardy Bearing. And you can also take her build in a completely different direction if you would like. You can give her a Ruse skill and a Rally skill to make her like a Ruse bot, which is really good honestly, but if they do have a Milla's defense is way higher than Sothis, so all they have to do is put Milla in the same column as Sothis, and that is going to shut down her abilities completely. Now I'm just going to show you guys all the defense replays that I had from this week with my Cav line. So that's all I have for today's video. I do really like how my defense team turned out, and I love that I was able to find a use for my OG Claude, since I haven't really been using him that much lately. Let me know in the comments what you guys think of this team, and let me know how your defense teams have been doing, and if you've seen any changes because of the new AR scoring. Thank you guys so much for watching, as always.